What would you do if a young boy looked up at you and asked, "Will you be my dad?" For Detective Ryan Daniels, that question changed everything. But what he uncovered next will leave you speechless. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible tales. And let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. The night was unusually quiet for Officer Ryan Daniels as he wrapped up his patrol in the outskirts of the city. The hum of the engine and the soft static of his radio were the only sounds breaking the silence. He had just passed the community center, its lights dimmed and doors locked, when something caught his eye, a small figure sitting on the steps. Ryan slowed his cruiser and turned on his spotlight, aiming it toward the entrance. A boy, no older than 9, sat hunched over with his arms wrapped around a worn stuffed bear. His clothes were slightly tattered, his hair a messy tangle, and his shoes looked like they had seen better days. But it was the boy's stillness that struck Ryan the most. It wasn't the restless energy of a kid out past curfew. It was a silence that spoke of something deeper, something wrong. He parked the car and stepped out, the crunch of his boots on the pavement alerting the boy to his presence. The child flinched, clutching the bear tighter, but didn't run. That alone told Ryan the boy wasn't a troublemaker. He was scared. Ryan approached slowly, his voice calm and steady. "Hey there, buddy. It's a little late to be out, don't you think?" The boy looked up at him, and Ryan's heart clenched. Big, wide eyes stared back at him, filled with both fear and something else, hope. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, crouching to his level. The boy hesitated, his fingers gripping the bear so tightly that Ryan could see the seam straining. "Are you a cop?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, showing the badge pinned to his chest. "That's right. My name's Officer Daniels. What's your name?" "Grayson," the boy said softly. "Well, Grayson," Ryan said gently, "what are you doing out here so late? Do you live nearby?" The boy's lips quivered, and for a moment, Ryan thought he wasn't going to answer. But then Grayson whispered the words that would change everything. "I don't have a home. I don't have parents. Can you be my dad?" Ryan froze, the weight of those words hitting him like a punch to the chest. He was used to tough situations, crime scenes, emergencies, desperate people calling for help. But this? This was different. "Grayson," Ryan said carefully, trying to steady his voice. "Let's take this one step at a time. I need to know where you came from. Did something happen to your parents?" The boy shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. "They're gone. A long time ago. I don't have anyone." Ryan felt a lump rise in his throat. He had lost people, too. He knew the hollow ache of absence, but he couldn't imagine what it must feel like for a child this young. "Okay," Ryan said softly. "We're going to figure this out, all right? But first, let's get you somewhere safe. You're not staying out here tonight." Grayson nodded hesitantly, his grip on the bear never loosening. Ryan extended a hand, and after a moment of hesitation, the boy reached out and took it. Back in the cruiser, Grayson sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out the window as the city lights blurred past. Ryan glanced at him, his mind racing. What had happened to this boy? Why was he alone? And why did he ask something so heartbreaking, so direct? They arrived at the precinct, where Ryan called social services. As they waited, he handed Grayson a cup of hot chocolate from the break room. The boy stared at it as though it were a rare gift, then took a cautious sip. "Thank you," Grayson mumbled. Ryan smiled faintly. "It's no problem, buddy." When the social worker, Ms. Harris, arrived, she reviewed Grayson's file and filled in some of the gaps. Grayson had been living in foster care since his parents died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Recently, he had run away from his latest foster home. Why did he run? Ryan asked, keeping his voice low so Grayson wouldn't overhear. Ms. Harris sighed. I'm not sure yet. It's possible there were issues at the home. Unfortunately, the system isn't perfect. Ryan's jaw tightened. What happens to him now? He'll stay at a temporary shelter until we can place him in a new home, Ms. Harris said. Ryan glanced back at Grayson, who was sitting quietly, hugging his bear. Something about the boy's vulnerability struck a chord deep within him. He couldn't just let the kid vanish into the system again. Can he stay with me tonight? Ryan asked impulsively. Just until you figure something out. Ms. Harris hesitated, her brow furrowing. That's highly unusual. I know, Ryan said. But it's late, and he's been through enough. I'll make sure he's safe. After a long pause, Ms. Harris nodded. All right. But this is temporary. As they pulled into Ryan's driveway, Grayson looked around nervously. Is this your house? He asked. Yep, Ryan said, grabbing his keys. It's not much, but it's home. Inside, Ryan showed Grayson to the spare bedroom. It was simple, just a bed, a dresser, and a nightstand, but to Grayson, it might as well have been a palace. He sat on the edge of the bed, clutching his bear. You hungry? Ryan asked. Grayson nodded shyly, and Ryan whipped up a quick plate of scrambled eggs and toast. They ate in silence, the boy slowly relaxing as he realized he was safe. Before heading to bed, Ryan peeked into the spare room. Grayson was already asleep, curled up with his bear, his small frame barely taking up half the bed. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, a strange warmth spreading through him. For years, he had kept his heart closed off, still grieving the loss of his own daughter. But now, looking at this boy who had no one else, Ryan felt something stir, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And he knew, in that moment, that meeting Grayson was no accident. This was just the beginning. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds of Ryan Daniels' modest kitchen as he poured himself a cup of coffee. He could hear soft footsteps behind him and turned to see Grayson standing in the doorway, clutching his stuffed bear. The boy's eyes darted around nervously, as if he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to be there. Good morning, Grayson, Ryan said, offering a warm smile. You sleep okay? Grayson nodded but didn't say much. Ryan gestured to the small kitchen table. Why don't you sit down? Pancakes sound good. The boy's face lit up for a brief moment, and he nodded again. It was the first flicker of excitement Ryan had seen in him, and it stirred something protective in his chest. As Ryan flipped pancakes on the stove, he tried to think of the best way to approach the questions swirling in his mind. He didn't want to push too hard, but he needed to know more about Grayson's situation. After breakfast, Ryan sat across from Grayson at the table. The boy was busy smearing syrup on his last pancake, and Ryan decided it was time to start a gentle conversation. Grayson, Ryan began carefully, I know you've been through a lot. But I want to help. Can you tell me a little more about what happened? Grayson froze, his fork hovering over his plate. He stared at the pancake for a long moment before finally setting the fork down. I don't really know what to say, he whispered. Let's start with your foster home, Ryan said, keeping his voice soft. Why did you run away? Grayson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fingers gripping the edge of the table. They didn't like me, he said finally. They said I was too much trouble. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay calm. What do you mean, too much trouble? The boy shrugged, his small shoulders slumping. They didn't want a kid who talked too much. They wanted someone quiet. They said I should just keep my head down and stop asking questions. Ryan felt a surge of anger rise in him. How could anyone treat a child like this? He leaned forward slightly. Grayson, asking questions doesn't make you a problem. It makes you curious, and that's a good thing. Grayson glanced up at Ryan, his eyes cautious but searching. You think so? I know so, Ryan said firmly. You deserve to be in a home where people appreciate you for who you are. Grayson didn't say anything, but a tiny spark of hope flickered in his expression. After dropping Grayson off at the community center under the care of Ms. Harris, Ryan headed to the precinct. He needed answers, and the first place to start was Grayson's case file. Using his police credentials, he accessed the social services database, pulling up Grayson's history. The file was thin, too thin. Ryan frowned as he scrolled through the details. Grayson's parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and he'd been placed in foster care shortly after. But the records were sparse, with little information about the foster families he'd been assigned to. Even more troubling, there were gaps in the timeline, as if parts of his history had been intentionally omitted. What are you hiding? Ryan muttered under his breath. He printed the file and decided to call Ms. Harris. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk but friendly. Officer Daniels, what can I do for you? It's about Grayson, Ryan said. I was reviewing his file, and it feels incomplete. Do you know anything about the foster home he ran away from? There was a pause on the other end of the line. I've had concerns about that home before, Ms. Harris admitted. The foster parents, the Marshalls, have a history of taking in children for financial reasons rather than a genuine desire to care for them. Unfortunately, they've managed to stay within legal boundaries, so no action has been taken. Ryan's grip on the phone tightened. Grayson said they told him he was too much trouble. That doesn't sound like a safe environment. It's not, Ms. Harris said, her voice tinged with frustration. But without solid evidence of neglect or abuse, it's hard to intervene. Ryan exhaled slowly, trying to rein in his anger. I'll see what I can find. This kid deserves better. Thank you, Ms. Harris said. Grayson's lucky to have you looking out for him. Later that evening, Ryan picked Grayson up from the community center and brought him back to his house. As they sat in the living room, Grayson pulled out his stuffed bear and began fiddling with its frayed ears. Ryan decided to take another shot at understanding the boy's past. Grayson, can you tell me about your parents? He asked gently. The boy's hand stilled, and he looked down at the bear. They were good, he said softly. My mom used to sing to me at night. My dad liked to build stuff, he made me a treehouse once. They always said we were a team. Ryan smiled, picturing the little family Grayson described. It sounds like they loved you very much. They did, Grayson said, his voice trembling slightly. But then the accident happened, and everything changed. Do you remember much about the accident? Ryan asked carefully. Grayson shook his head. Not really. Just that we were driving, and then, everything went dark. Ryan nodded, sensing the boy's hesitation. He didn't want to push further, but one thing was clear, Grayson's parents had given him a foundation of love, and it was something he was still holding on to, even in the face of loss. That night, as Grayson got ready for bed, he paused in the hallway and looked up at Ryan. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly. Ryan crouched down so they were at eye level. Because everyone deserves someone in their corner, Grayson. You've had a tough start, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Grayson considered this, then nodded slowly. Thanks, Officer Daniels. Ryan smiled. You can call me Ryan, you know. Grayson hesitated, then said, okay. Ryan. As the boy disappeared into the spare room, Ryan leaned against the wall, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He had started this out of duty, but now it was something more. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a connection to Grayson, a responsibility to make sure the boy never felt alone again. And in the back of his mind, Ryan knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. The next morning, Officer Ryan Daniels sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee and staring at the slim file he'd printed on Grayson. It was troubling how little information there was about the boy's life since the accident that had claimed his parents. The gaps in the records, combined with what Grayson had told him about the marshals, suggested a deeper issue. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something beyond neglect. Ryan decided to dig further. After dropping Grayson off at the community center with Ms. Harris, he returned to the precinct and enlisted the help of his colleague, Detective Sandra Vega. Sandra was known for her sharp instincts and an uncanny ability to piece together seemingly unrelated clues. "What do you have?" Sandra asked, leaning over his desk as he spread out Grayson's sparse file and the notes he'd taken from his conversations with Ms. Harris. "Not much," Ryan admitted, tapping the file with his pen. "Parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. Grayson's been through multiple foster homes since then, but there's almost no detail in his records. It's like someone scrubbed his file." Sandra frowned. "That's unusual. Even for a kid in the system, there should be more here. Medical records, school reports, something." Ryan nodded. "Exactly. And the Marshalls, the foster family he ran away from, have a history of taking in kids for the money. Ms. Harris said they've managed to avoid scrutiny, but I think Grayson's situation might expose something bigger." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "You think it's corruption?" "Maybe," Ryan said. "Or worse." Ryan and Sandra began digging into the Marshalls' background. Using court records and public databases, they uncovered a pattern. The Marshalls had taken in over a dozen foster children over the past decade, but there were few details about what happened to those kids after they left the household. "Look at this," Sandra said, pointing to her screen. "Several of the kids they fostered were moved to other homes within months, and their files are just as empty as Grayson's. This isn't normal." Ryan's jaw tightened. "They're exploiting the system. Taking in kids for the stipends and pushing them out when it gets inconvenient." "But why redact the files?" Sandra asked. "If it's just about the money, why go to the trouble of erasing the details?" Ryan hesitated, a sinking feeling forming in his gut. What if it's more than just money? What if they're covering something up? Sandra nodded grimly. "We need to talk to Grayson again. He might know more than he realizes." That evening, Ryan picked up Grayson from the community center. As they drove home, Ryan glanced over at the boy, who was staring out the window with his stuffed bear clutched tightly in his lap. "Grayson," Ryan said gently, "can we talk about the Marshalls?" Grayson tensed, his fingers gripping the bear a little tighter. "Why?" "I'm trying to figure out why they treated you the way they did," Ryan explained. "And I think it might help other kids, too. You're not the only one they've hurt." Grayson was silent for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, he said, "They didn't like it when I asked about my parents." Ryan frowned. "What do you mean?" Grayson looked down at the bear. "I asked if I could keep some of my mom's things. My social worker said the Marshalls had them, but when I asked about it, they got mad. Mrs. Marshall said I should forget about my parents, that I didn't need junk from the past." Ryan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Did they ever give you anything from your parents?" "No," Grayson said, his voice trembling. "They said it was gone. But I don't think that's true." Back at the house, Ryan decided to press further. "Grayson, when you left the Marshalls, did you take anything with you?" Grayson hesitated, then reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this," he said quietly. "It was in a box in the garage. I don't think they knew it was there." Ryan unfolded the paper carefully. It was a handwritten letter, and as he read it, his breath caught in his throat. "Dear Grayson. If anything ever happens to me, I need you to know how much I love you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want you to always hold on to that love, no matter what. There are people in this world who will try to take things from you, but don't let them take your heart. Stay strong, my little bear. Love, Mom." Ryan's chest tightened as he read the words. It was a mother's love poured onto the page, a final message to her son. But there was something else, an undercurrent of fear in the way she wrote, as if she'd known something bad was coming. "Did your mom write this?" Ryan asked, his voice soft. Grayson nodded. "I think so. She called me Little Bear." Ryan folded the letter carefully and handed it back to Grayson. "This is important, Grayson. Your mom wanted you to know how much she loved you." Grayson clutched the letter close to his chest. "Why would someone try to take things from us? What did she mean?" Ryan didn't answer right away, his mind racing. The letter raised more questions than it answered. What had Grayson's parents been involved in before the accident? And could it be connected to the marshal's suspicious behavior? The next day, Ryan brought the letter to Sandra, who immediately recognized its significance. "This isn't just a goodbye letter," she said. "It's a warning. I think Grayson's mom knew something, and someone wanted to make sure she couldn't talk." Ryan nodded grimly. "I need to know more about the accident that killed them. If it wasn't an accident, we could be dealing with something much bigger than just a corrupt foster family." Sandra looked at him, her expression serious. "You're going to need more than just this letter to prove anything." Ryan tapped the folded letter on his desk. "Then we'd better start digging." As he left the precinct that day, Ryan felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't just protecting Grayson now, he was fighting for the truth, for the family the boy had lost. And he wouldn't stop until he found it. Detective Ryan Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that Grayson's parents' deaths weren't as simple as they appeared. The letter from Grayson's mother felt more like a warning than a goodbye, and the gaps in the boy's foster records only deepened the mystery. Determined to get answers, Ryan started digging into the details of the car accident that had claimed the lives of Grayson's parents. Ryan pulled the accident report from the archives. According to the file, the car crash had been ruled a tragic accident caused by bad weather and poor road conditions. The official explanation stated that the car skidded off a rural highway and collided with a tree. But as Ryan read through the details, several things stood out. First, the skid marks on the road indicated the car had swerved suddenly, as if avoiding something, or someone. Second, the damage to the vehicle didn't align with a simple off-road collision. The force of the impact suggested the car had been hit before it crashed into the tree. Ryan frowned, his instincts telling him there was more to the story. He called Sandra Vega, his colleague, for a second opinion. She arrived at his desk within minutes, a cup of coffee in hand. "Let me guess," Sandra said, scanning the file. "Something about this doesn't sit right with you." "You could say that," Ryan replied. "Look at the skid marks and the impact report. This wasn't just bad weather." Sandra leaned over the desk, studying the documents. "You're right. It looks like they might have been forced off the road. Did they check for paint transfer or signs of another vehicle?" Ryan shook his head. "Not in the original investigation. It was closed too quickly." Sandra's lips tightened. "Then it's time we take a closer look." Ryan and Sandra decided to track down the first responder listed in the original report, a retired firefighter named Frank Delgado. They found him living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, tending to his garden when they arrived. "Mr. Delgado?" Ryan called out as they approached the gate. "I'm Detective Daniels, and this is Detective Vega. We're looking into an old case you were involved in, the Harris family car accident." Delgado straightened, wiping his hands on a towel. "That was a long time ago," he said, his voice gravelly. "Why's it being reopened now?" "We have reason to believe it might not have been an accident," Sandra said carefully. "Do you remember anything unusual about the scene?" Delgado rubbed his chin, his brow furrowed. "Now that you mention it, yeah, I do. The whole thing felt off. The car was in bad shape, sure, but I remember seeing paint scratches on the rear bumper, like it had been hit." Ryan's pulse quickened. "Did you report that?" "I did," Delgado said, nodding. But when the final report came out, there was no mention of it. I figured someone higher up decided it wasn't important. Do you remember anything else? Sandra asked. Delgado hesitated, then nodded. There was a black SUV parked a little ways down the road. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, it feels like more than a coincidence. Ryan exchanged a look with Sandra. Thank you, Mr. Delgado. You've been very helpful. Back at the precinct, Ryan and Sandra cross-referenced the accident report with records of vehicle registrations and complaints in the area. After hours of searching, they found a match, a black SUV registered to a private security firm contracted by a powerful real estate developer named Marcus Ralston. Ralston's name wasn't new to Ryan. He was a wealthy businessman with a reputation for using intimidation to get what he wanted. A deeper dive revealed that Grayson's parents, Sarah and Michael Harris, had been fighting Ralston over a piece of land they refused to sell, a property that Ralston needed for a massive development project. This is it, Ryan said, pointing to the file. Ralston had motive. He wanted that land, and when the Harrisas wouldn't sell, he took matters into his own hands. But why kill them? Sandra asked. There had to be other ways to pressure them. Ryan thought about the letter from Grayson's mother. There are people in this world who will try to take things from you. She knew, Ryan said. Grayson's mom knew they were in danger. And when they refused to back down, Ralston made an example out of them. As they pieced together the evidence, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It started with small things, a car parked too long outside the precinct, strange hang-ups on his phone. Then, one evening, as Ryan drove Grayson home from the community center, he noticed headlights following them. Stay down, Ryan told Grayson, his voice calm but firm. He took a sharp turn into an alley and killed the engine, watching as a black SUV cruised past them. Is something wrong? Grayson asked, his voice trembling. Ryan forced a reassuring smile. Just being careful, buddy. But his mind was racing. The closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous it became, not just for him, but for Grayson. The next morning, Ryan found his car vandalized. The words, "Back off," were scrawled across the windshield in red paint. He called Sandra immediately. They know we're onto them, Ryan said. Which means we're getting close, Sandra replied. But we need more. If we're going to take down someone like Ralston, we need rock-solid evidence. Ryan glanced at Grayson, who was sitting on the porch with his bear, completely unaware of the danger looming over them. Then we'd better find it fast. I won't let them hurt him. With the stakes higher than ever, Ryan doubled down on his investigation. He reached out to Grayson's former neighbors, hoping to find someone who could confirm the Harrisas' conflict with Ralston. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Cartwright, provided a crucial piece of information. They were good people, Mrs. Cartwright said. But they were scared. I remember Sarah telling me that someone had threatened her, said bad things would happen if they didn't sell. Ryan's suspicions were confirmed. Did she ever mention who threatened her? Mrs. Cartwright hesitated. She didn't say a name, but she mentioned a man in a black SUV. Said he'd been watching their house. It was all coming together. The black SUV, the threats, the crash, it wasn't an accident. It was murder. And now, the same people who silenced Grayson's parents were trying to silence him. As Ryan left Mrs. Cartwright's house, he made a silent vow. He would protect Grayson at all costs. And he wouldn't stop until everyone responsible for this was brought to justice. The mounting evidence against Marcus Ralston and his network was damning, but Detective Ryan Daniels knew it wasn't enough to bring them down. He needed concrete proof, something that would tie Ralston directly to the deaths of Grayson's parents and the intimidation tactics used against other families. Time was running out, and Ryan felt the weight of the danger pressing closer with every move he made. Ryan was no stranger to threats, but this time, it wasn't just his life at stake. Grayson had become a target, even if the boy didn't realize it yet. After the incident with the black SUV, Ryan decided to take extra precautions. That night, as Grayson sat at the kitchen table working on a puzzle, Ryan leaned against the counter, watching him. "Grayson," Ryan began, trying to keep his tone light, "I think we should stay at a friend's place for a while. Just to be safe." Grayson looked up, his brow furrowed. "Safe from what?" Ryan hesitated, not wanting to scare him. "It's just a precaution. Sometimes when people don't like what I'm working on, they try to make things difficult." "Because of my mom and dad?" Grayson asked, his voice small. Ryan nodded. "Yeah. But I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." Grayson studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." The next morning, Ryan brought Grayson to Sandra's house. As a detective herself, Sandra understood the risks and had a secure home where Grayson could stay temporarily. "I'll keep an eye on him," Sandra assured Ryan. "You focus on getting the evidence we need." Ryan thanked her and turned his attention back to the case. He knew his next step would be risky, but it was necessary. He had to confront Ralston's private security firm, the same company linked to the black SUV spotted at the scene of the crash. Ryan arrived at the offices of Titan Security, the firm owned by Marcus Ralston. The sleek building was a fortress of glass and steel, its imposing design meant to intimidate. Ryan walked in, flashing his badge at the receptionist. "I need to speak to the head of security," he said. The receptionist hesitated, then made a call. Moments later, a tall man with a stern expression approached. "Detective Daniels, is it?" he said. "I'm Charles Bentley, head of operations. What can I do for you?" "I have questions about one of your vehicles," Ryan said, his tone sharp. "A black SUV that was seen near a car crash 2 years ago. The Harris family." Bentley's expression didn't change, but Ryan noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw. "I'm not sure what you're implying, detective, but we don't involve ourselves in accidents." "Is that right?" Ryan said, stepping closer. "Because witnesses saw one of your vehicles tailing the Harrisas just before their car went off the road. Care to explain that?" Bentley smirked. "You're fishing, detective. And I'd be careful where you cast your line. Some waters are too deep for amateurs." Ryan clenched his fists, but before he could respond, Bentley turned and walked away. It was a dead end, for now, frustrated but undeterred, Ryan returned to the precinct. As he reviewed the files again, his phone buzzed. It was Sandra. "You're not going to believe this," Sandra said. "Grayson found something." "What is it?" Ryan asked, sitting up straight. "It's a flash drive," Sandra said. "He said it was hidden in the lining of his stuffed bear. He remembered his mom sewing something into it before the accident." Ryan's heart raced. "What's on it?" "I haven't opened it yet," Sandra said. "I wanted to wait for you." Ryan drove to Sandra's house immediately. Grayson was sitting on the couch, clutching the bear as Sandra plugged the flash drive into her laptop. As the files loaded, Ryan and Sandra leaned in, their eyes scanning the screen. The drive contained a series of emails, legal documents, and voice recordings. The evidence was overwhelming. Ralston had been pressuring the Harrisas to sell their land, using threats and intimidation. One of the emails explicitly stated that removing the problem would clear the way for the development. "This is it," Sandra said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This is the proof we need." Grayson looked up at Ryan, his eyes wide. "Does this mean they'll go to jail?" Ryan knelt in front of him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It means we're one step closer to getting justice for your mom and dad." With the flash drive in hand, Ryan and Sandra prepared to take their findings to the district attorney. But as Ryan left Sandra's house that night, he noticed the same black SUV parked down the street. His instincts screamed danger. He called Sandra immediately. Don't let Grayson out of your sight, he said. They know we're on to them. Be careful, Ryan, Sandra replied. We're too close to let this fall apart now. Ryan drove home, his mind racing. The evidence they had uncovered was enough to bring down Ralston, but it also painted a target on their backs. He knew they had to act quickly, before Ralston's people made their next move. The next morning, Ryan met with the district attorney, Rebecca Lang. As he handed over the flash drive, he explained the connections they had uncovered. This is enough to issue warrants, Lang said, her eyes narrowing. We'll take this to the grand jury immediately. Make sure Grayson stays protected, Ryan said. They'll come after him if they think he's a threat. Lang nodded. I'll assign protection detail. And Daniels, be careful. These people don't play fair. Ryan left the office feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The evidence was in the right hands, but the fight was far from over. He thought of Grayson, the boy who had asked him to be his dad, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. I won't let them win, Ryan muttered to himself. Not this time. As he drove back to Sandra's house to check on Grayson, Ryan couldn't help but feel that the final battle was just around the corner, and he was ready to face it head-on. The discovery of the flash drive hidden in Grayson's stuffed bear had blown the case wide open. The documents and recordings it contained tied Marcus Ralston directly to the intimidation, threats, and potentially the murder of Grayson's parents. But with the evidence now in their hands, Detective Ryan Daniels and his team became targets. The storm was closing in, and Ryan knew they were running out of time to act. After delivering the flash drive to the district attorney, Ryan returned to Sandra Vega's house, where Grayson was waiting under her care. As Ryan stepped inside, Grayson looked up from the couch, his face lighting up with a mix of relief and uncertainty. Did you find out anything? Grayson asked, clutching his stuffed bear tightly. Ryan sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We did. The flash drive had everything we needed to prove what happened to your parents. The people who hurt them are going to face justice, I promise. Grayson's eyes widened. You mean, they're going to jail? Ryan nodded. If the court does its job, yes. But for now, we have to be extra careful. They know we're getting close, and they might try to stop us. Grayson's grip on the bear tightened. Are they going to come after me? Ryan's voice was firm, filled with resolve. Not while I'm here. You're safe, Grayson. I'll make sure of it. That night, as Ryan reviewed the case details in Sandra's kitchen, the lights flickered briefly before going out. A tense silence fell over the house. Power outage? Sandra asked, her voice low. Ryan's instincts screamed otherwise. He reached for his gun, motioning for Sandra to check on Grayson. Stay here with him, Ryan said, his tone sharp. I'll check outside. Sandra nodded, closing the door to the living room where Grayson was hiding. Ryan stepped onto the porch, scanning the darkened street. A black SUV sat parked a few houses down, its engine idling quietly. Figures, Ryan muttered under his breath. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the side of the house. Ryan tightened his grip on his gun. Whoever's out there, you picked the wrong house, he called out. There was no response, but the shadow disappeared into the night. Moments later, the SUV sped off, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. Ryan exhaled, his body tense but his mind racing. They were sending a message. The next morning, Ryan met with District Attorney Rebecca Lang to escalate their response. They're not backing down, Ryan said, his voice laced with frustration. They were at Sandra's house last night. Lang's expression darkened. That's a clear attempt at intimidation. I'll expedite the warrants and arrange for protective custody for Grayson. No, Ryan said quickly. They'll expect him to be isolated in a safe house. He's safer with me, where they won't know his exact location. Lang hesitated but nodded. Fine. But I'll assign an officer to assist you. This is getting too dangerous to handle alone. As Ryan and Sandra continued to analyze the evidence from the flash drive, they uncovered a critical recording. In it, Marcus Ralston was heard instructing his private security team to eliminate the problem and make it look like an accident. The date of the recording matched the night of the car crash that killed Grayson's parents. "This is it," Sandra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This proves everything." Ryan leaned back in his chair, a grim satisfaction settling over him. "We need to make sure this gets to the judge. If we don't move fast, Ralston will try to bury us before we can bring him down." That evening, as Ryan drove Grayson to a secure location, his phone buzzed. It was Sandra. "Ryan, I just got word, they're moving against Ralston tonight. The SWAT team is set to raid his mansion." "Good," Ryan said. "About time we got the upper hand." But as he hung up, he noticed headlights in his rearview mirror. A black SUV was tailing them, its movements deliberate. Ryan's pulse quickened. "Grayson," he said calmly, glancing at the boy in the passenger seat, "I need you to stay down, okay? Just like before." Grayson nodded, his small hands gripping the bear as he crouched low. Ryan accelerated, weaving through traffic to lose their pursuer. The SUV matched his every move, its aggression increasing. The chase reached a breaking point when Ryan took a sharp turn into an empty parking lot. The SUV followed, screeching to a halt as three men stepped out, armed and determined. "Stay here," Ryan told Grayson, his voice firm. "Lock the doors and don't move." Ryan exited the car, his gun drawn. "This is your last warning," he called out. "Turn around and leave." The men ignored him, advancing with malicious intent. Ryan took cover behind his car, his training kicking in as he exchanged fire with the attackers. The chaos was deafening, but Ryan's focus remained sharp. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. The attackers hesitated, then fled as backup arrived. Sandra's team had tracked Ryan's location and arrived just in time to prevent the situation from escalating further. The next morning, Marcus Ralston was arrested during the SWAT raid on his mansion. The evidence on the flash drive, combined with witness testimonies and new discoveries, was enough to secure a strong case against him. His associates were also taken into custody, dismantling the corrupt network that had caused so much pain. Ryan and Grayson watched the news coverage from the safety of Sandra's house. As footage of Ralston in handcuffs played on the screen, Grayson turned to Ryan. "Does this mean it's over?" he asked. Ryan placed a hand on Grayson's shoulder, his voice steady. "Almost. But no one's ever going to hurt you again, Grayson. That's a promise." That night, as Grayson prepared for bed, he paused at the doorway to his room. "Ryan," he said softly. "Yeah, buddy." Ryan replied. "Thank you, for everything." Ryan smiled, his heart full. "You don't have to thank me, Grayson. That's what family does." Grayson nodded, his expression thoughtful. "So, does that mean we're family?" Ryan's voice caught, but he didn't hesitate. "Yeah, kid. We're family." As Grayson climbed into bed, Ryan sat in the living room, his resolve stronger than ever. They had survived the storm, but their journey was far from over. Together, they would face whatever came next. The arrest of Marcus Ralston was a major victory, but Detective Ryan Daniels knew the battle wasn't over. Bringing Ralston and his associates to trial would take more than just evidence. It required navigating the threats, politics, and influence of a powerful man who was determined to escape justice. For Ryan, this wasn't just about law and order, it was personal. He wasn't just fighting for Grayson, he was fighting to honor the memory of Grayson's parents. The district attorney, Rebecca Lang, summoned Ryan, Sandra Vega, and a few other key investigators to discuss the trial. The conference room was tense, filled with stacks of files, crime scene photos, and recorded testimonies. Rebecca stood at the head of the table, her sharp gaze sweeping over the team. Ralston's defense is going to throw everything at us, she said. They'll claim the evidence is circumstantial, that the recordings are doctored, and that this is a witch hunt. We need to be airtight. Sandra nodded. The flash drive alone connects him to the Harris murders. Combine that with the testimony from his former employees, and we've got a solid case. Rebecca tapped a document on the table. We do, but Ralston's influence runs deep. He's already bribing witnesses and threatening others. We need someone on the stand who can make this personal. Ryan knew what she was implying. You want me to testify? Rebecca nodded. You're the one who uncovered the evidence, built the case, and brought Grayson under your care. Your testimony could be the deciding factor. Ryan's jaw tightened. He had no problem taking the stand, but he was more concerned about the repercussions for Grayson. If I do this, Ralston's lawyers will dig into my life. They'll use anything they can to discredit me. Rebecca's gaze softened. You've handled worse, Daniels. But if we're going to win this, we need you. Ryan glanced at Sandra, who gave him a reassuring nod. We're behind you, Ryan, she said. You're not in this alone. As the trial date approached, Ryan began noticing strange occurrences. One night, while driving Grayson home, he realized his car was being followed. He pulled into a gas station, watching as the black sedan parked a few spaces away. The driver never got out but stayed just long enough to make his presence known before speeding off. Back at his house, Ryan found a note taped to his door. It was a single word, scrawled in red ink, stop. Ryan crumpled the note, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let Ralston's scare tactics derail the case. But the next day, the threats became more personal. Grayson's school called to inform Ryan that someone had been asking about him, a man who claimed to be a distant relative. Ryan's blood ran cold. He knew it was Ralston's people, trying to get to Grayson. That night, he packed their bags and moved them to a safe house arranged by Sandra. We'll keep him secure, Sandra said as she handed Ryan a key. But you need to be careful, too. Ryan nodded. They won't scare me off. They're only making me more determined. In the midst of the chaos, Ryan tried to shield Grayson from the worst of it, but the boy wasn't oblivious. One evening, as they sat in the small living room of the safe house, Grayson turned to Ryan. Is this because of my parents? He asked, his voice small. Ryan looked at him, his heart aching. Yes, buddy. But it's also because of you. You've been so brave through all of this, and I promise I'll keep you safe. Grayson fiddled with the stuffed bear in his lap. Do you think my mom and dad would be proud of me? Ryan's voice softened. I know they would. You've been through so much, but you've stayed strong. That's something to be proud of. Grayson nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. I think they'd be proud of you, too. The day of the trial arrived, and the courtroom buzzed with tension. Ralston sat at the defense table, his expensive suit and smug demeanor a stark contrast to the gravity of the charges against him. Ryan sat with Rebecca Lang, Sandra, and other members of the prosecution team, ready to take the stand. Grayson wasn't in the courtroom, he remained at the safe house under protection. Ryan's heart ached at the thought of the boy waiting alone, but he knew it was for the best. When Ryan was called to testify, he walked to the stand with his head held high. As he recounted the investigation, the discovery of the flash drive, and the threats he'd faced, the courtroom hung on his every word. The defense tried to rattle him, questioning his methods and implying bias, but Ryan remained steadfast. The evidence doesn't lie, Ryan said firmly. Ralston orchestrated the harassment of the Harris family and was directly responsible for their deaths. He used his power to silence them, but today, we're giving them their voice back. Just when it seemed the prosecution had the upper hand, the defense called an unexpected witness, Charles Bentley, the head of Ralston's private security firm. Bentley denied any involvement in the Harris case, claiming the recordings were fabricated. Ryan's anger flared as he listened to Bentley's lies, but Rebecca Lang remained calm. "We anticipated this," she whispered to Ryan. "Trust me." As Bentley finished his testimony, Rebecca stood and approached the witness stand. "Mr. Bentley, you claim you had no knowledge of the Harris family or any intimidation tactics used against them. Is that correct?" "That's right," Bentley said confidently. Rebecca smirked and held up a printed email from the flash drive. "Then how do you explain this email, sent from your account, instructing your team to remove the problem? Would you like me to read the timestamp aloud?" The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Bentley's composure cracked, and his lawyer frantically whispered in his ear. It was the turning point the prosecution needed. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Marcus Ralston was found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, intimidation, and murder. As Ralston was led away in handcuffs, Ryan felt a wave of relief. Justice had finally been served. That evening, Ryan returned to the safe house to tell Grayson the news. The boy's eyes lit up when he heard the verdict. "They're going to jail?" Grayson asked. "They are," Ryan said, pulling him into a hug. "It's over, buddy. You're safe now." For the first time in months, Ryan felt a sense of calm. He had kept his promise to Grayson's parents, and now, they could begin to heal. But as he looked at the boy in his arms, he knew their journey together was just beginning. With the trial over and Marcus Ralston sentenced to life in prison, Detective Ryan Daniels and Grayson Harris finally found themselves free from the shadow of danger. The battle had been long and harrowing, but justice had prevailed. Now, as they stepped into a new chapter of their lives, the question of what came next loomed large. In the days following the verdict, Grayson began to show signs of relief. He no longer flinched at unexpected noises or clung to his stuffed bear as if it were his lifeline. For the first time, he seemed to believe that the world could be a safe place again. Ryan, however, knew that healing would take time. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Ryan's home, watching the sunset, he turned to Grayson. "How are you feeling, buddy?" Ryan asked gently. Grayson shrugged, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Better, I guess. It's weird not being scared all the time." "That's a good thing," Ryan said, smiling. "You don't have to be scared anymore. You're safe here." Grayson hesitated before speaking. "Do you think my mom and dad would be proud of me? Of what we did?" Ryan's chest tightened at the boy's vulnerability. "They'd be more than proud, Grayson. They'd be amazed at how brave you've been. Everything we've done, it's all because of how much they loved you." Grayson nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Ryan. For everything." As the days turned into weeks, Ryan began to think more about his relationship with Grayson. The boy had no family left, no one else to look out for him. Over time, Grayson had become more than just a responsibility, he felt like family. One afternoon, Ryan sat across from Sandra Vega at a coffee shop, sharing his thoughts. "I've been thinking about adopting Grayson," he said, his voice tentative. Sandra's eyes lit up. "Ryan, that's amazing. He already sees you as his dad. This would just make it official." Ryan hesitated. "Do you think I'm ready for something like this? I mean, after everything with my own daughter." Sandra reached across the table, placing a hand on his arm. "Ryan, you've already proven that you're exactly what Grayson needs. He doesn't need perfect, he just needs someone who loves him and will fight for him. And that's you." That evening, Ryan decided to talk to Grayson. They sat together on the couch, watching an old superhero movie. During a quiet moment, Ryan turned to him. "Grayson, I've been thinking about something," Ryan began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "How would you feel about making this official? About me adopting you?" Grayson's eyes widened, and for a moment, Ryan worried he'd said the wrong thing. But then, the boy's face broke into a wide smile. Really? Grayson asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You'd want to be my dad? More than anything, Ryan said, his throat tightening. But only if that's what you want. Grayson threw his arms around Ryan, hugging him tightly. I want that. I really do. Ryan hugged him back, feeling a swell of emotion he hadn't felt in years. Then it's settled, he said softly. We'll make it official. The day of the adoption hearing was a quiet but emotional affair. Grayson sat beside Ryan in the courtroom, his hands gripping the edge of the chair nervously. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, smiled as she looked over the paperwork. Grayson, the judge said, addressing him directly, do you understand what this means? Detective Daniels will legally become your father. Grayson nodded, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I understand. And I want this. The judge turned to Ryan. And you, Detective Daniels? Are you ready to take on the responsibilities of being Grayson's father? Ryan's voice was filled with certainty. I've been ready for a long time, Your Honor. The judge smiled warmly. In that case, it is my pleasure to grant this adoption. Congratulations to you both. As the gavel fell, Grayson turned to Ryan, his face beaming. Does this mean you're stuck with me now? Ryan laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. You've got that backward, kid. I'm the lucky one. That evening, Ryan and Grayson celebrated with Sandra and a few close friends. Sandra brought a cake, and they gathered in Ryan's living room, surrounded by laughter and warmth. To Grayson, Sandra said, raising her glass of sparkling cider. For being the bravest kid we know. Grayson blushed, but he smiled wide. Thanks, everyone. For everything. As the night wound down, Grayson pulled Ryan aside. This feels like home, he said softly. Ryan knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze. That's because it is, Grayson. This is your home, and it always will be. Later that night, Ryan and Grayson sat together on the porch, a photo of Grayson's parents resting on the small table between them. Grayson held his mom's letter in one hand, his other hand resting on the stuffed bear she had given him. I miss them, Grayson said quietly. I know, Ryan said. And that's okay. Missing them means you still love them. They're always going to be a part of you. Grayson nodded, his expression thoughtful. But I'm glad I have you now. Ryan smiled, his heart full. Me too, buddy. Me too. In the months that followed, Ryan and Grayson settled into a new rhythm of life. They worked on school projects together, played video games, and even built a treehouse in the backyard, just like Grayson's dad had once done for him. For Ryan, Grayson brought light back into a life that had been shadowed by loss. And for Grayson, Ryan became the father he thought he'd never have again. Their journey had been marked by pain, struggle, and uncertainty, but it had also brought them something beautiful, a family. Together, they proved that even in the face of tragedy, love and resilience could create something lasting and true. And as they looked toward the future, they knew one thing for certain, they would face it together. As father and son, this story reminds us that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, commitment, and being there for someone when they need you the most. Ryan and Grayson's journey shows that even in the darkest moments, hope and resilience can lead to something beautiful. Their bond, built through hardship and trust, is a testament to the power of choosing to stand by each other. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. We'd love to have you as part of our growing community.